Dawson Rider Wiki.
Hey YouTube, Dawson Rider here with my review of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers 25th Anniversary Comic Special. So, the title pretty much says it all. It was an anniversary special comic. It was sort of like an annual in terms of, you know, it's a collection of various stories that are individualized. Only two of them are primarily MMPR, and then there's one that's really, other than, you know, the fact that it's a continuation of the storyline, isn't really related specifically to MMPR, but then two of the other ones are sort of adjacent to it, which I'll get to in a second. Just to get it out of the way, the MMPR parts, their first two stories are MMPR related, and they're almost classic premises from the show. Like, I feel like it's very clearly more leaning towards the show, at least in my opinion, compared to the comic. Like, even the art style, like the way the Rangers are drawn, leans much more towards the show. Like, if you know what I'm talking about, like the comic designs, like for the characters, are clearly based off of the Rangers, of course, but they're a little bit different. So like when I'm reading it, I hear different voices in my head. They feel like different versions of the characters. Whereas the design just felt like these were definitely the 90s ones. Like the first plot was basically like Rita using this device, part of this disc had to do with the green candle, and gave it to like a fake pug or a pug because they were having an adoption fair, and she was going to use it to use, I guess, some of the residual green energy in Tommy, because like in this comic it was White Ranger Tommy. I think this was season 2, maybe 3? 2, it was 2 because they used White Tiger Sword to like take over him again. It felt like a classic MMPR plot. It was kind of okay. The second one kind of revolved around, like, this was not long after like the new red, black, and yellow Rangers took over Rocky, Ab, and Aisha, and like they were like fighting stuff, and the others were watching them, and they're like, oh, they're just gonna do just fine. I'm just kind of glossing over those. I'm sorry if you wanted to hear more about those, but they were both fine. Like, I wasn't like, oh my god, these are amazing, but I wasn't too excited about them, just, even though this is the MMPR 25th Anniversary Special, but I was not looking forward to that part as much because I knew there were stories from other seasons in there. I'll get to something about the MMPR ones at the very end wrap up, but basically they were fine, but nothing hugely special. But like, again, I'll circle back at the end. But let's get to the meaty stuff, which was the first one that was based off of another season was actually Mystic Force. It was a little smaller story, resolving around, I keep saying resolving instead of revolving around basically Udana having nightmares about Lianbo being held back by this mysterious night figure we all know as Korag, and then her going to see Mystic Mother about the dreams, and then sort of confronting, like in a dream state or world or whatever, the Lianbo Korag combo. It was kind of, not confusing, but just weird, because I never assumed like the Korag armor was an entity. I just assumed Korag's personality straight up, you know, was Lianbo. Like, it came from Lianbo. Like, I didn't think it was like two different consciousness. Maybe that wasn't what they were going for, and Korag was just Lianbo speaking as Korag, but I don't know. But it was still kind of neat, you know. It was no like really new lore or anything other than that this happened and she had visions and stuff, and it was just cool to see some of that stuff. And like I said, she talked to Mystic Mother, who is Rita, which is honestly, I first saw like a preview panel. Whenever I see these, I usually just glance at them to see like the art and to see like a general preview, but I usually don't read them because I'm like, I'll just wait till it comes out. So I knew Mystic Mother was in it. And I got excited about it because I'm like, oh, that makes so much sense. They'd want to do a Mystic Force story because Rita becomes Mystic Mother, and I thought they were going to do a little tidbit, maybe exploring her character more, but they didn't. So I was a little disappointed, but apparently I found it on Twitter that was like a late edition, and originally it was supposed to be somebody else, and then but that would be something I'd love to see explored later, just because since Mystic Mother is Rita, I think that would be a really cool story for an annual, even, because I've mentioned in the past I'd love to see the annuals become more like stuff about all the different seasons, but I think the Mystic Force Mystic Mother one could be really cool because you could still be like, oh, this is an MMPR comic annual, but it's the story of like what happened between, you know, Countdown to Destruction to Mystic Force when she became this. I think that's a really cool story. It feels like something anybody that works on the Boom stuff might want to touch. That sounded weird, but still, it was a nice little story, and it kind of led to Udana being resolved to, you know, keep pushing on and moving on. And then she kind of said like, oh, I kind of forgot the dream. Basically, like, she forgot the specifics of the dream because obviously she didn't find out Lianbo and Korag had any relation until much later in the series. but she didn't forget the resolve she had, and it kind of ends with like a panel of her looking to the future of the Mystic Force Rangers. Nothing too huge, but it was a really nice story, and it was nice to see Mystic Force get some love. It's one of my favorite seasons. I feel it's very underrated and kind of underappreciated. So I was actually kind of happy to discover that the reason it was chosen wasn't because of Mystic Mother, like it was going to get this focus regardless. But I would love to see something on that in the future. I think that would be really neat. The next one was a Ninja Steel story. A lot of people, both when this and the annual one came out, were like, oh, Ninja Steel. But it's like, I was kind of excited to see Ninja Steel done in the comic form in different hands with a different spin. And this was nothing too huge, but I thought it was a really nice little story, especially for the anniversary. It basically revolved around the Ninja Steel Rangers are meeting, and then Mick brings out, it seems that this is taking place during Super Steel, by the way, and then Mick brings in Alpha 5, who informs them that years ago, the Mighty Morphin team was fighting this like interdimensional monster that they couldn't defeat, but they could like sort of push back into his dimension a little bit, but like they knew one day it would return, and so he's asking the Ninja Steel Rangers that, oh, it's about to return, can you defeat it? And then so then we cut sort of a back and forth, like if this was a TV show, it'd be flashing back and forth between the two, Mighty Morphin and Ninja Steel both fighting these monsters at different times, and then both Jason and Brody like rush the portal when they're attacking it, and they both end up in the same space for a minute. I actually thought there was going to be a longer scene of them speaking, but it was basically like, you can't be here, and Brody pushed him out back into his time, but it was still neat. And then like Brody discovered like not even we can beat him yet, but I think by the next time another team of Rangers happens, this could happen. So he like calls Alpha and he's like, you need to make note that in some odd years you need to contact the team of Rangers existing at that time, and they can do it. And then like as Brody's leaving, you see in the background like an explosion that basically shows that some unknown future team of Rangers did destroy this monster. So it was actually a really neat story. It was nothing like, but it was, I thought it was cool because it makes sense that they'd want to do a story about the current team and the first team meeting. It was kind of cool, timey-wimey stuff of like they're occupying the same space because of weird interdimensional stuff. Not to mention like the unknown future team also at the last second occupying the same space as Brody. I thought it was neat because of, like I said, the timey-wimey stuff, the two teams meeting, well, two teams sharing the same story. Jason and Brody met briefly. At least I assume it was Jason. But the cool thing I thought about it was just the idea of like the power, the enduring legacy, that's an enduracy, of the Power Rangers, and the tradition of the Power Rangers is going to keep living on, and there's always going to be a team to rise up to protect the Earth from whatever happens. And I thought that was a cool way to show it via the fact that you had the MMPR team was fighting, and years later Ninja Steel was ready to go up to bat to fight this monster, and then years later Unknown team would be ready for it. Part of me thought it would be kind of cool if they previewed a future team, but I kind of doubt that would happen because I think it was implied it was more of a far future team, like, you know, 25 years also, and not like, you know, Beast Morphers or a Q Ranger or Geodra season or something like that. Okay, and then the last one is easily my favorite of all the stories in this issue. Also probably one of my all-time favorite Boom comic storylines of any of the issues, annuals, whatever, which was the Trial of Astronema, which was basically this idea that like this legal council of space, that's their official name, no I'm just kidding, but like found Corone on TerraVenture or wherever she happened to be at the time. I believe she was on TerraVenture, doesn't matter. But they found her and they're putting her on trial for her crimes as Astronema, which is a really cool idea. Like, it's one of those things that Power Rangers rarely tackles, like the true consequences or more like deeper aspects of a character or storyline that they just, I want to say can't, but it's more like believe they can't. Because Power Rangers, even in some of the best of hands, is always played with these outdated kid gloves. Like, when I was reading this whole story, I kept thinking about, I just finished the most recent season of Ultron, and just literally fantasizing about an animated Power Rangers series that took advantage of the world. Like, this issue took such advantage of the world, the storylines, future storylines, because it included SPD Time, which was really neat, and I was just thinking, how amazing would it be to have a Voltron quality animated series where the, you know, the universe felt like lived in, like all these different alien races we've met and different lore, and I probably will never happen to that level, but that's what I would love to see. Even if we had to restart from the beginning to get new viewers and then build up that mythology again, it's just, but that's not about this. But it was really cool, and it explored this idea, which I think actually was hinted at in the series. Well, not idea, but the fact that Astronema was believed to be dead, because I think it was Onyx. I believe it was Onyx she was on in Lost Galaxy. I don't remember if it was an onyx-like planet or onyx, but when she was looking for the pink quasar saber, and they said, I can't remember if they said Astronema was dead or missing, but like they thought she was out of the picture. So it kind of explored that idea more or less, that whether completely meditated or not, like when she left at the end of In Space, you know, she kind of faked her death. I mean, everyone saw Astronema being carried out in any kind of destruction, but I mean, like, Corone was kind of able to escape in an almost self-made witness protection, if that makes any sense. And that was a really cool idea, and they had like all these witnesses talking about all these terrible things Astronema did, and then even we had, like I said, SPD Connection, who I thought was just a member of Doggy Kruger's race, because I wasn't sure where this was at in the timeline, but I guess it makes sense, to be honest. It was Doggy Kruger talking about how it was actually Astronema that more or less, like, they took like the shield codes or something to lower the shields and gave them to Grum, and so she was like the catalyst which led to Grum's attack on his planet, which led to the death of his wife, Icinia, which was really cool connection that, like, this story would have been amazing without it, but it was just an extra layer of connectivity to the world. But like all these witnesses, and then you have Andros and Leo and Maya show up to basically testify on her account, and they kind of intercut between like, oh, she like stole a kid's lollipop and licked it right in front of him, and then Maya's like, we're best friends forever. And so it was like dual testimony of the Rangers, and like, hey, she's done a lot of good as Corone, and they're like, but she was a totally different person, and it was really neat to see, and it was also cool to see, because like during the deliberation phase, you had like Andros and Corone talking, and she's like, you know, this isn't fair, you're not Astronema, and Corone's like, no, I am Astronema, I did all these things, you know, and, which is, that's one of my, again, I think I said this earlier, but I'm a little bit biased about this story because Corone / Astronema, Arone, is one of my favorite all-time Power Rangers characters, or all-time favorite Power Rangers characters, because I think she's one of the most complex and interesting ones. And they did a pretty good job of that in the show, but this really dug into it in the way that they didn't, where she was like, you know, even every day I have to fight, like, my more, like, instincts to be more patient, because this isn't a case of like Green with Evil or the evil White Ranger, or when the Thunder Rangers were, it's not like it wasn't some sort of spell or mind trick, like she was raised to be this evil, and they kind of explored that, which I thought was really neat. And that she felt actual guilt for it and a need to atone. And then it resolved with like all of a sudden Astronema appearing at the trial, and they're like, see, they're two different people, and they escape. And at first I thought, oh man, this is an amazing story, I can't believe they would spoil it by having her literally split into two like the Evil Queen in Once Upon a Time. But no, it was a trick by Andros of like a solid hologram, and then Corone was like mad at Andros for like, I really wanted to face the consequences of this, and then she basically said, you know, I love you, brother, but I need to go off on my own. Maya, gather my things from Terra Venture. That's how Corone sounds. But it was really, really cool just to see like the overall feel of the world of Power Rangers, and exploring Corone's character from like the perspective of people she sees as Astronema, and just really exploring that it wasn't just like a, oh, I'm free of the spell now I can go fundraise. It was like, it's an interesting character. I would love to see that explored more. Twitter buddy, acquaintance of mine, Darkblaze, mentioned a while ago, or questioned, like, what would you like to see, you know, who would you like to see get a Soul of the Dragon, like, solo series? I think Corone would be perfect for that, because, like, taking place right after this, sort of a spiritual journey would be really fascinating, because there's so many fascinating aspects of that. And that's an element I would have loved to see explored with Titanium Ranger, because he was not under a spell, he was raised by demons, and he went from like, oh, I'm gonna kill you because I was raised by demons and I hate my father for giving me up, and then he was like, oh golly gee pops, sorry. So I wish they would do a Titanium Ranger story in the future. That would be really cool, because there's a lot more to that character, I think. But anyway, this was a bit longer than my usual comic reviews, I'm sorry, but I mainly really wanted to talk about that Astronema thing, so I appreciate you being patient with me if you watched the whole video. But overall, I thought this was a solid issue. Some parts not as awesome as I would have wanted, but the Astronema one more than made up for it, and I quite like the Ninja Steel one as well. The thing I wanted to say about the MMPR ones real quick is I wish they would have made it more like the annual stories, where it was a really cool, more backstory bit, like they've had some really cool solo-focused stuff, or maybe something that tied into how MMPR's legacy affects a future team, rather than just kind of I get the wanting to do a sort of, oh, this is the spirit of MMPR, this is a classic story, but I wish it would have been something more. But overall, really solid issue. Definitely recommend at least checking it out for the Astronema one if you're a Power Rangers or in-space fan specifically. Overall, an 8. Anyway, until next time, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and of course hit the notifications so you can actually see what you're subscribed to for more crazy videos and long rambles from me. Dawson Rider, signing out.